This is Left Voices for Wednesday, March 12th, 2014. I'm Andrea Sears. Tonight,
almost all of the benefits of growth, almost all of the benefits of workers working hard and raising the productivity of their companies, almost all of it has gone to the 1%.
On Wall Street, the recession really is over. For the rest of us, there's a long way to go. Bonuses paid to New York City's securities industry employees grew by 15% last year. According to figures released by the New York State Comptroller's Office, the average bonus in 2013 was almost $165,000, the best year since the crash of 2008. That's on top of salaries that in 2012 averaged more than $365,000, 5 times the average for all other private sector jobs. Meanwhile, at the other end of the scale, the federal minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour, a rate that has not even kept pace with inflation for the past 40 years. John Cavanagh, director of the Washington, D.C.-based Institute for Policy Studies, says the numbers send a very clear and disturbing message.
The fact that Wall Street banks just handed out over $26 billion in bonuses at the end of last year says to the public that Wall Street, the Wall Street that crashed our economy and that's corrupted our politics, does not feel at all shy or hesitant or worried that Washington or the Obama administration is going to rein them in any way. The notion that they would pay that much in bonuses at a time when tens of millions of Americans are out of work and where millions of Americans are paid so little that they live in poverty means that they feel they're back. They don't have to worry about regulation. They don't have to worry about being reined in. Maybe they're hoping nobody adds up the number. They're also misreading a moment. I think they don't get how angry the American public still is, how this still is very much, if you will, a populist moment where people feel that Wall Street and corporations and the 1% are making out like bandits. They're clueless to that. And they know they can get away with it. And that is a direct challenge to all of us who are working hard to reduce inequality in this country, who are working hard to raise the minimum wage. We can't let them get away with it.
The recession officially ended, I believe, in 2009. How much of the end of the recession is simply the upper echelon, the Wall Street bankers, the 1%, raking in record-making profits while everyone else is stagnating or losing ground?
The United States was a relatively equal country in terms of income in the 1950s and 60s and even the first half of the 1970s. And it came through a massive struggle of working people and their allies to turn the U.S. 100 years ago from being one of the most unequal in the world to one of the most equal. It's a great story that Americans need to know because it's a reminder that we know how to make a more equal country. We know how to tax corporations and the 1% and Wall Street, and we know how to create programs like the GI Bill that get jobs, good jobs to the people who need them and create a vibrant middle class. We know how to do it. But really since 1980, the onset of Ronald Reagan, income inequality has been moving in the wrong direction. And really since that time, almost all of the benefits of growth, almost all of the benefits of workers working hard and raising the productivity of their companies, almost all of it has gone to the 1% or the top 10%. More recently, it's really gotten focused in the 1%. And this is obscene. It's outrageous. It's what motivated people to go out on the streets 2 years ago and occupy Wall Street and its different manifestations around the country. The anger's still there, but the system is now rigged. And just to note, part of what changed in the 1980s that made this possible is that most big corporations went global, and they could play workers off against one another in poorer wage countries versus the United States. They had the ability to bargain down wages and working conditions here. And as they became more powerful, they translated that economic power into political power, and they rewrote a lot of the tax laws, the government procurement laws. The laws of this nation have been rewritten to favor corporations and the 1%. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that they get most of the benefits, and it is outrageous that they feel so brazen and protected that they not only make, massive CEO pay, and they pay themselves 400 times their average worker, but at the end of the year they give themselves this giant Christmas present of bonuses that aren't going to the people who need it.
During the 1980 presidential campaign, candidate George H.W. Bush invented the term voodoo economics to describe Reagan's economic policy. And that was the trickle-down economics that you were just talking about. Since then, it's been embraced as gospel by Republicans and Democrats, really. They seem to be playing into that mythology. The distribution of these bonuses, as IPS has pointed out, if that were to go to minimum wage workers, it would double their income and it would triple the impact on the economy. How does that work?
What we pointed out today as we got these figures of what the Wall Street banks handed out in bonuses is we looked at the number of Americans who work full-time at the minimum wage. There's over 1 million Americans who work full-time making only the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. And we looked and said, oh my gosh, they are paid only together, that over 1 million workers are paid only $15 billion a year. And here these bonuses just came up to over $26 billion. So they could have done what we need. We need a minimum wage in this country of $15 an hour. That's what will allow people to live in dignity, to get out of poverty. They could have done it by simply redistributing those bonuses to their workers. And the other thing we pointed out, and this is such common sense, when you give someone who has very low wages extra money, they spend it. They go out and spend it in the economy. They buy food. They buy pharmaceuticals that they need. They buy essentials, and that stimulates the economy, which in turn helps generate more jobs. If you give a big bonus to an already very rich person, they sit on most of it. They don't spend it, and it has much less of a impact on the economy. And we worked with some economists in putting this together. The economists call this the multiplier effect. If you give the same amount of money to a poorer person than a richer person, there's much more bang for the buck, much more of a multiplier in the economy if you give it to someone who's poor. And this is part of our argument in many cities now, in many states, and nationally to raise the minimum wage. It would be one of the smartest things we could do in terms of getting the economy going again, which in turn would help create more jobs. The more people are employed, the less unemployment there is, the more workers have bargaining power, the more they're able to sit across the table from their corporate CEOs and their employers with more power, and the more they can demand that when they increase productivity in a firm and that firm makes more money, the more they can demand that some of that should come back to them in terms of higher pay. I mean, I think we're at a point where Americans get this. They know that the 1% in corporations and Wall Street are ripping them off. What they're feeling less hopeful about is their ability to change it. And this is where this minimum wage fight is so important. I think we can win it. I think the majority of Americans, it turns out even a bunch of Republicans, have people in their families who are suffering from low wages. We can win this. And I think we can win more. To make the country more equal, we've got to pull the top down. We have to tax the 1% in corporations and Wall Street. And so part of our message at IPS is fight like hell to increase the minimum wage, but don't be satisfied with just that. This is a moment when we can win more.
Following the 2008 crash, there were some provisions that were put in the Dodd-Frank bill, for example. Some of that was meant to discourage speculation, but these kinds of figures sound like they are reaping the benefits of very speculative investing. Are we building up to another fall?
We could be. A lot of what's happened since that last crash is that banks have consolidated further. So we have 4 banks that are about half of the banking assets in the country, 4 giants that are way too big to fail. We know that it's going to be hard to win major changes in the way Wall Street is constructed and run. However, if there's another crash, there will be the same moment we had 5 years ago. It was, again, a populist moment. People were outraged that the big banks were crashing, and Washington was talking about how to bail them out. I think there will be even less of an appetite to do that next time around. And there is legislation sitting here in Washington, some of it sponsored by both Democrats and Republicans, that would put severe disadvantages for banks over a certain size. There's legislation out there that would reinstate the Glass-Steagall Act that separated the commercial banking that most of us are involved in with investment banking. Bill Clinton knocked that out with his financial wizards. You rightly pointed out that both Democrats and Republicans have overseen this deregulation. It's horrible to say that we will need another crash to really put in place the sorts of restrictions and regulations we need to recreate a finance system that's good for communities and Main Street and ordinary people. But unfortunately, that may be the way it has to be. Of course, we're trying to do as much mobilizing and education and so on to try to get more people behind such reforms now, but we still have the problem that Wall Street not only crashed our economy, but it's corrupted our politics. There's too much money coming from Wall Street into the campaigns of our members of Congress. And therefore, it's hard to imagine in this current setting that Congress, shy of almost a revolution on the streets, really putting strong regulations on these banks.
John Cavanagh is director of the Institute for Policy Studies based in Washington, D.C. This has been Left Voices for Wednesday, March 12, 2014. Join us again tomorrow for more news and information from a progressive perspective. I'm Andrea Sears for leftvoices.net.